Hello and welcome. My goodness, I am so excited to be here. Hello, hello, hello. I would like to say that I am Shannon Stott. I am your host for this afternoon. I saw that Sophia Casey was saying that this is a treat for her after a long day of work. Who else is this a treat for? Tell me in the chat where you are coming in from, where you are joining us from. And if you can remember something, a piece of art that sparked your imagination or inspired you as a child, what was it? Can you remember? Can you describe it? Can you describe it? How did it make you feel? Let me know where you're from, what piece of art inspired you as a child. I see people from Maryland. Thank you for being here, Charlene. So good to see you. Who else is out there? You can look at the chat. It is right to your right. Yes, 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 yes. This is exciting. We have so many people here and such a wonderful conversation that we are on our way to. Yes, good day and welcome to Women in the Arts. We are participating today in a panel discussion on women in the arts and their contribution, influence, and impact on history, culture, and communities with guest speaker Tammi Lawson, Shadi Ghaheri, and Diedra Harris-Kelley. As you know, hi, greetings from Staten Island. Yes, thank you so much for being here. An African head, yes. I remember having African heads in the house as a young girl, and they were always so inspiring and feeling like mystical. I remember feeling like that I could write any story, right? Yes, I love it. I love it. So we aren't here today just by accident, by whimsy. We are here. Our discussion today has been thoughtfully brought together by the PEACES Collective. Thank you so much. And an artist herself, Ikrama Muhammad, is the owner of PEACES Collective, a local handcrafted accessory and home goods company whose goal is to create sustainable markets and systems for handmade and recycled goods. PEACES Collective also contributes to human development through experiential learning, economics, and education. Please join me in welcoming Akrama Muhammad to tell us more about the PEACES Collective. Oh my gosh, Akrama, thank you for being here. Obviously, you're here.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon. Thank you very much. As always, beautiful. Well, I want to say welcome to all family and friends. And thank you for joining us here this evening as we celebrate and honor our sisters during Women's History Month. And of course, we know that women are making history every month and every day, but it's nice to take an opportunity to sit down and get together in sisterhood and honor each other. For those of you who don't know much about the PEACES Collective, many of you have been to this venue before, but we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And our goal is to provide platforms for makers and artists, local makers and artists, where they can display and share their work. And they donate a portion of their proceeds for us as a nonprofit to develop programs in the community, such as this Wisdom, Wellness, and Wealth discussion, which we have once a month. And as you can see through the video, we used to do this in person back in the olden days when we could get together and hug and all that kind of good stuff. Really happy that we have this platform now to continue to build community, because community is more important now than ever. It's been a year since this pandemic, and about 3 million, almost 3 million women have been forced out of the workplace or left the workplace. 41% of Black businesses have failed. So we need community now more than ever. And one way that we build community is by supporting local businesses and supporting local artists. And if you'd like to support the PEACES Collective, you can visit us at piecescollective.org, and you can either shop for the beautiful handcrafted products that we have made by female artists. You can make a donation, a tax-deductible donation, or just visit us and look around, see what we're about, and then share that information with others and spread the word. So, really happy to thank Karen Freeman for really spearheading these workshops and putting them together. It's a lot of work. I have to thank our guests for coming. And we have a really great panel, as usual, for you tonight. I just want to end by quoting great Nina Simone, who said, an artist's duty, as far as I'm concerned, is to reflect the times. So I hope that you will relax and enjoy the reflections of these wonderful, talented sisters that we have today. And we'll see you in the future. Peace.
Thank you, Akrama, and welcome to everyone. I am loving seeing, as far as reflection of the times, I'm loving seeing the past reflected in ourselves right now, as you all are reflecting on things that you saw in your childhood. I see gourds, I see pieces of art inspired me from libraries as a child, all sorts of, as a child of 5, I found myself, I found my peaceful place making a pot holder on a loom. You all have such wonderful memories of what art means to you. And today we are talking to women who are going to tell us all about art, talk to us and continue this conversation. We have Tammi Lawson, who is the curator of the Art and Artifacts Division at the Schomburg Center, where she is the steward of a collection of fine art and artifacts dating back to the 17th century that reflect the history and expressive culture of the African diasporas. The items conserved within Ms. Lawson's division range from African art, paintings, and sculpture works on paper and textiles to important representations of ephemeral and material culture. Please welcome Tammi Lawson to the screen. Welcome, Tammi. It is great to have you.
Thank you. I'm glad that I was invited.
Yes, yes, we are glad to have you. We also have Shadi Ghaheri. Shadi is a theater director, choreographer, and writer from Tehran, Iran, based in New York City. She has directed Titus Andronicus and choreographed Passion for Yale School of Drama as co-artistic director of the 2017 Yale Summer Cabaret. Shadi co-curated a 4-play session entitled Canon Bal, directing Ellen McLaughlin's, oh my goodness, Trojan Women and Lear by Young Jean Lee. Shadi was the directing fellow 2018 to 2019 at Rattlestick Playwright Theater and the winner of Robert L.B. Tobin Director Designer Showcase Opera America 2019. Please welcome Shadi. Shadi, I am glad that you are here, and I'm sure you are coming to the screen in the chat. Just give a welcome. Thank you so much, Shadi, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for everyone who have joined us and are sharing their time with us. I'm very happy to be here.
Good, thank you. And we also have Diedra Harris-Kelley is a current co-director of the Romare Bearden Foundation, the nonprofit organization perpetuating the legacy of one of our greatest American visual artists. She offers a unique perspective on Bearden's work, being a formerly trained painter and niece of the artist's late wife, Nanette Bearden. For the last 9 years, she has been part of the team leading the foundation through a successful run of exhibitions, publications, educational, and celebratory programs around the life and art of Bearden. Welcome, Diedra Harris-Kelley.
Hello. Hello.
Welcome, and you can, yes.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for that introduction, Shannon.
No, it is my pleasure. It is my pleasure to welcome such, oh my goodness, talented and educated women, right? Talking about art, this is what we want to talk about. So what I would like just to start off very early. So I asked the chat some questions about memories that they have of artistic pieces that inspired them as children. And I want to pose the same question to you so that we can start at least down a track of childhood art, what it means to have art in our lives as children, and then what it means to continue having art in our lives as we progress through. So let's start with childhood. For those of you on the screen, what are some pieces that you remember and how did they inspire you?
Archie comics. Yeah, I know it sounds trashy, but it's one of the ways that I learned how to draw from my brother. He was totally into comics, and he used to draw from them, and I learned how to mimic him. And I mean, of course, I'm also very lucky. I come from a family of artists, so there was art around. You were allowed to be an artist. My father was an artist, a more commercial artist. My uncle Romare Bearden, of course. My young aunt, I call her sometimes my baby aunt, Sheila Rohan, was one of the dancers in the founding company of Dance Theater Harlem. So, you know, it was the sky's the limit. I mean, we got to go see dance. We were taken to museums. It's all about exposure. And so, yes, I had a lot of it as a kid. I was giving it to somebody else.
Okay, I guess I'll go. Go ahead, Shadi.
No, you go ahead first, please.
Okay, well, I always had a love and respect for artists, but where I grew up in Staten Island in New York, my neighbors were artists. So right behind me, my neighbor, Mr. Cleavon, he was a jazz musician and played music all day and all night. And I'm not talking about records, he had jam sessions. Then a few doors down from him, there was another musician and artist, his name was Max Sanders. And he would paint outside. And then, you know, just growing up in New York, there were drummers around all the time. I was always attracted to artists and art and always had a respect for them.
I think like I remember the first interaction I had with art, like books from my father's, like bookshelves, and mostly like things that had to do with politics. And I knew that I shouldn't read them because like there's a lot in my culture that like from the early on, you're like as a woman, as a person with a female body, you're like, oh, like those things are like not for you. So I think my curiosity took me like the first, truly my answer to this question is like Albert Camus, like books and plays, and later on like a really amazing like female actors of our country on cinema. Was that like, that's exactly what I want to do.
Yeah. Oh, Deidra, you sound like you're going to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that, you know, exposure is one thing, and seeing, you know, real art and pictures of art, but also, you know, I had a lot of models of the artist's life, which is something that, you know, we don't really think about that, because sometimes if it's not something that's allowed in our lives to do, like if you're being directed to do other you know, different kinds of academic work, you know, be a doctor or a lawyer, whatever these hopes and dreams your parents have for you. You know, if you don't really know what an artist does, sometimes it's hard to dream, right? And so, you know, like Tammi, I grew up with artists in the neighborhood. One of my art idols is a woman who's a very under-recognized artist, severely under-recognized artist from Staten Island, Andrea Phillips. And she was a friend of my aunt, Sheila's. And so I saw those works and I knew that she, you know, when you go to her house, it was magical, right? Like she plastered everything with art and collage and color and form. And even her refrigerator was covered with labels and art. It was an artistic piece that she'd made. So, you know, it's that kind of knowing what life is like as an artist. You know, yes, there was Romare as an artist, and we knew that, you know, he was a great artist and he would have artists coming in and talking with him. But even as kids, we were allowed to be there in his space. So that's very important to have them around and know what a life of an artist is like.
I was just going to say, it's funny that you mentioned Andrea Phillips, because it just so happens her husband is Mac's cousin, Max Sanders. So, you know, I know Andrea as well, and Saint, her son, is just...
That's right. He's a musician. Yeah. I mean, it's a small world, you know, when you when you grow up like that. And in fact, you know, my Nanette, my aunt Nanette would bring us off of Staten Island into the city. When she lived in the city, her and Romare, she would bring us, you know, small groups of, you know, like Charlene and me and Irie. We would come in and spend the weekends and go to theater. We went to, you know, live theater. I've always now had a love for live theater and dance, particularly, you know, ballet, because she had a company and she was very involved in that. So yeah, I mean, we also got, you know, dragged out of our element into it.
Yeah. There was a, you know, in the 70s, there was a lot of art and dance around in the community. And I just want to mention also Sajda.
That's right. Right. Yes. Universal Temple of the Arts.
Yeah. And her niece is on here too, all the way from Brazil watching.
Ah,
yeah, it's a small world, right? Yeah.
All right. Shout out.
Shout out to
I want to hear more. There's an intersection that's happening here. So Tammi and Deidra, you said that you have this, you grew up in the arts. It was acceptable for you to be around art and to look at art as something that it sounds like that you could do. Whereas Shadi, it sounds like that maybe that's not where you were coming from. So I'm wondering from those perspectives, how were you inspired to continue in an artist's life?
Yeah, it is pretty interesting because I, for a long time, like I'm the first artist in my family. Like my father and brother, engineers. My mother was a person who stayed home and raised the children, which is a culture a lot in Iran that women stay and become the mother. But I really didn't have role models to follow. But it doesn't matter. I think a dreamer is a dreamer, and a person who's just like really dying to say something out there, we will figure out a way to do that. And I feel like Deidra and I, like, we know so little of each other, but it's just something very much like familiar in the spirit of it, that is like, no matter what, like circumstances, or I will call force of geography has been, like, and we will find a way to see it and do it. But I like studied my bachelor is like in business administration. So I really, for a very long time, pushed to be an artist. And it is like very gender is such a big thing in our culture, and the problem most of the time, a human right issue in our country. But if you look at like people around, you will see a lot of young women, and not even age doesn't matter. You see a lot of powerful women who are really pushing boundaries and doing things they want to do. So I think what I see between those is that I digged and find my way into it, while like there is a different version of raising kids here, and a different version of freedom. We are, it is one of the worst dictatorships present. I'm smiling. This is not a happy smile, but it is a country under dictatorship. So it's very different. have
Yeah.
art. I always think about the Audrey Lord when she talks about poetry. I learned from her a lot that like what a weapon this is, what a tool, a revolutionary tool it is, and it's poetry is not luxury to some of us, and it's very different than poetry coming from like white Western canon that we have been like an extreme like mainstream seeing it. But like poetry for me, it's like the strongest weapon I have for the justice, I believe. And it has manifested itself in my life as a theater artist. Like I tell stories. You give me stage, I tell you the story. You give me a camera, I'll tell you the story. I'll adjust, but I will not stop telling the story.
Yeah, it's interesting because you come from a culture, Shadi, that didn't sort of encourage it, and you found a way. But even for us, you know, being an artist, when I told people I was going to school to study art, they were like, "How are you going to make money?" You know, so I got a lot of pushback, and it wasn't, you know, because I, you know, wasn't, you know, really feeling like I could make money. I wasn't really thinking about making money, but also, you know, I think too that there's a concern with how you're going to be able to, you know, make a living and how you're going to be able to make it as an artist. And you know, I do think that we do have to keep struggling to have our dreams, and we need support. We need support from our families, you know, and I think I'm lucky to have grown up in a family that just said, okay, yeah, she does art. She's an artist, you know, and just leave her alone. And then when I was in high school, my high school teachers said, well, what are you going to do for college? And I was like, I don't know. Not going to college is not an option. So I think I'll go and I'll study art. And they, you know, pushed me. And so, yeah, but I do think that, you know, even though we feel free, there's still a lot of limitations to what, and the understanding of what artists do. You know, they don't just, I mean, artists are not just painters. You know, there's a whole range of things that artists do, designers, developers, you know, and of course the performing arts. So yeah, it's the perception that still, you know, I know my daughter was going to college and she was going to be studying literature, and people were like, well, why would you let her do that? Like, why would you not sort of steer her into something that was more profitable?
Now
she's
a teacher in an Ivy League school.
Yeah, now right. But yeah, she went all the way. But yeah, I guess it is still that fear that the jobs are not there. But I think we all can attest to, you know, making things happen anyway.
So I'm wondering, in this idea, as you're talking about struggling in the art and the frivolousness of art, I'm saying this tongue in cheek, right? What are you going to do? How are you going to make money? Because as everyone knows, I'm sure everybody in the chat really truly understands that art does not influence politics, it does not influence culture, and it does not influence our life. Look at Shadi. She's like, what is she saying?
What are you talking about?
Right? It doesn't influence those things. Is that right?
No.
Absolutely not. So tell me, I'd love a discussion about each of your experiences on how when you found, okay, I'm going to be an artist, this is what I do. How have you found that it has influenced your life, influenced your culture, politics, and every other aspect, any other aspect that has been on your path?
Well, now we're not all artists. We don't all identify as artists. And in fact, I'm not really working. I'm not really working as an artist right now. Although I live as an artist, I see things in an artful way. I think I really do appreciate, you know, the sort of dialectics of image making and of shapes and forms. And that sort of drives so much of the way that I think. But the work that we do to support other artists is also very important. So I wanted to say that because I know Tammi, you know, she may not practice as an artist, although she's a very artful person, and she so artfully fixed her background to have one of my paintings in the background. So I like having.
Yeah, in honor of Deidra as an artist in Women's History Month, I changed my what I had up there for a minute. But yeah, like I'm not an artist, but I love artists and respect artists so much. So my actual job as a curator and a librarian is to document artists, Black artists, because as we noted earlier, well, first as Black people, we're not a part of the art historical canon a lot of times. And then when it comes to being a woman, it's even less. So I document artists, whatever they're doing. I go to shows, whatever they want to make known about themselves, so that eventually somebody will be doing research, will be doing a dissertation or a thesis, and they need to know about the artist, and they need to see a representation, or they need to see their work. They could come to me, and I'll pull it out for them. But you know, there needs to be a record to almost to legitimize their career, or just to know that they exist. Because even right now in the 21st century, people could, a person could get their PhD even from a Black university, and not know many Black artists or any Black artists, unless they actually do the research themselves. If they're free to do the research themselves. So who you're going to learn about definitely is Romare Bearden. You're going to learn about Jacob Lawrence. You may learn about Henry Ossawa Tanner.
Tammi, as you are listing these people, can you give us just a little bit, because you are keeping the record. Give us a little bit of what you're finding, how these artists are influencing our culture, are influencing the times.
Say it again. I'm sorry. Say that
as you're listing some of these artists that we know now and are going to know. Tell us a little bit how you're finding that they are influencing the times.
And I still didn't listen to you. I'm so sorry, because I'm looking at this chat. Someone asked about Michael Cummins. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm looking at her. I'm so sorry. That's so disrespectful.
Good. So as you're seeing all of these artists, because you are the keeper, right? You are a curator. You are seeing how these artists that you're naming and mentioning are influencing the times, are influencing us. And I'm just asking, tell us how they are influencing the times.
Well, one of the real ways that they are creating pathways for other artists, like Deidra mentioned earlier. Well, lucky for her that she was around artists and she knew that she could be an artist, and she was supported by her family. You know, people are on their own and they don't know. And a lot of times I think that artists work in silos, or they're the only one. They just didn't know. They could be creating in sculpture, or they could be, but they're never around. They don't have that camaraderie. They're not being taught by other Black artists. And I think when they know, it opens them up. There's conversations, there's a likeness, there's a kinship, but also the affirmation that what they're seeing and feeling and what they're presenting is valid. So I think that artists build on that, especially Black artists. So create
Right. And when you think about, Tammi, when you think about those early artists in the Harlem Renaissance, you know, the Harlem Renaissance, we mainly know about the literary artists and the music, but the visual art was so limited to, you know, artists like Aaron Douglas, who just came to New York from Kansas, and, you know, he didn't have anyone before him that he could see that were actually putting Black figures in their paintings. I mean, there was Henry O. Tanner, and they were, you know, they were doing sort of high painting style like the European artist. But he was involved in creating actual new forms that were breaking ground for how we could see the figure, how the figure could be in space in a different way, which were all of these discussions that were being had around the world about breaking old forms. And you know, just like with Bearden, it's breaking these forms that we're used to seeing and making new forms, right? Bringing together ideas that then get you to think differently. And you had teachers, wonderful teachers like Augusta Savage, you know, that's right, as Tammi was saying. And so I do think that the idea of art is about seeing things differently. It's a language, it's a form of communication, right? And so if you're not exercising it, if you're not thinking about it, you know, think about, you know, how abstract forms, when they first came out, when artists like Picasso was doing abstract forms, people were like, what's wrong with dude? He can't draw, right? It's like, okay. And now when you think about how we see abstraction everywhere in everything, in graphic arts, on TV, and it's just accepted. So we've accepted that form of communication. We understand that figures don't always have to look like they used to look, right? So that is what artists can bring. Sometimes they can have the vision and the scope of something new. So then when you think about the, you know, political art, you're really thinking about how artists are giving people images to create new ideas. So it is very powerful. Think about film, think about music, think about all of the things that have really taught you things about the way the world works. That's what artists do.
You all to continue down this path. Deidra, you said it is important to be able, you mentioned Picasso, who is showing us a different way of thinking, right? I want you all to talk a little bit about why it is important for artists to reach the public and teach them to think differently. Why is that important?
Well, for one practical reason is that, first of all, not everybody's literate.
Yes.
Not everybody's literate. And there's a lot of people who are visual thinkers. Some artists, you know, relay messages and make you understand, like Deidra was saying, they give you a future self and things and other ways to think about things, but they also some things are innate and they're coded, and that you may not be able to articulate it. Sometimes artists can't articulate it verbally, but they could paint it, they could sculpt it, they could dance it. As a comedian can make you laugh, but they could be talking about something serious. So art is beautiful in that way, that it communicates beyond words. And again, if you know, you could read it and you can understand a whole lot through art.
It's a language. Think about cave paintings, right? Like when people can't read, or church paintings, you know, that talked about the stories that they wanted to, you know, perpetuate, but they were dealing with individuals who had spoke different languages and had limited, you know, literacy. So these, you know, visual art and music is something you don't have to, it kind of levels the field in some ways for artists. And theater, I mean, I don't want to leave theater out, because that's one of my favorite ways in which I can actually put myself inside of a situation that I would not have been able to imagine otherwise. Right, Shadi?
Yes, definitely. It's very wonderful to hear like you touching on very big topics that all of them are part of being an artist. Like I always think about archiving. It's harder to not be part of the movement of history, and the ones who write it, like we say, like history has always been written by victors. And I, for myself, know that like if I don't try to leave something behind, tracks of my existence and my mother's and my grandmother's, no one else is gonna do that just the way that I'm digging back there to find them. Like in different ways, our different histories have like erased like women and the work that women has left. So I admire like your work in archiving. I think like archiving should be something that we shouldn't forget about. And then like just being an artist, like I think you're artist in many different ways. You as a facilitator, you're an artist. As an educator, you're an artist. Like storytelling for people who have not seen like or heard stories, like I can't even give that like a number of value compared to like, okay, did New York Times finally write about me? Who cares? Like there's a bunch of like white, like heterosexual men, upper class, sitting there with all of their privileges that I don't share, and they want to like me or not. While like I like feel like we really need to take stories to children and young women who like every time I see them, they say, I didn't know you exist. And I'm like, guess what, sister? There's so many of us out there. And it took me so much time to find that and realize that. And I want like them to know it sooner. Like when I teach in universities or directing universities, mostly, I don't teach actually, it's directing, but I go in as like a guest teacher. You see these young women who are like in this mess, and they don't know how to make sense out of it and be an artist. And like in order to share that, like this part of being a storyteller, a brave person who calls out things, like we talk about politics, but I don't think we can ever divide or like do this politics from our arts ever again. Not that ever that was the case, but today with our understanding, like unfortunately or fortunately, my race, my politics is like a dress forever dragging with me. I like, leave this on stage, they say it's political. I'm like, no, it's like I can't escape it anymore because of who this is. And I think like we should do that I find it my responsibility as an artist to in any way possible do that and continue doing that. Being at archiving, teaching, making the art, there's so many ways.
Shadi, you briefly touched on it, and you briefly touched on youth in general. And I would love to hear from you and everyone else about what we lose when we take art away from our youth, right? We lots of times right now, math and sciences, which are artistic in their own ways, but those types of things are being pushed into schools, and slowly art in its forms, in its dance, in its theater, in its making or painting, is being pulled out of schools. So what is it that we lose when we take out art and we remove it from our youth?
Well, I just want to jump in and say at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, which is part of the New York Public Library, we have, we value our youth. We have a junior scholars program that meets every Saturday, and it basically teaches Black history, but from different points of view. There's the actual history. They're learning history through art. So there's history. They're learning about archives. They're learning about dance. Chad Boseman actually was one of our instructors for 9 years. Before he went to Hollywood, he taught at the Schomburg Center in our Junior Scholars Program. We also had a 5-year grant from the Matisse Foundation, and we had a teen curators program that taught art and history and literature, but through art. So we would invite artists to come in and teach the children all types of things, but they were learning using the archives. They learned how to curate. They learned how to be makers. They learned how to be historians, and they learned cultural literacy through it. So it's very important. And the Schomburg Center has always been a cultural hub like that, going back to when the library bought Mr. Schomburg's collection. And Augusta Savage, one of the women that I want to honor tonight, was a artist, a sculptor, a teacher, an art activist, administrator, and she came from Florida. She came to New York during the Harlem Renaissance period and graduated from Cooper Union. And then immediately she, well, not immediately, but she won a scholarship to study in Paris and Europe. And when she came back, she came to the New York Public Library's 135th Street Branch Library, which is the Schomburg Center now, and started an art school. So she was an influential teacher, and many artists. I say she's the most influential artist of the 20th century, and I say that because not only did she teach, but she brought artists along with her. And after she taught them, she hired them as teachers. Then by the time the WPA came along, she was the director of WPA programs, and then she got her teachers directorship. So a young Jacob Lawrence learned under Augusta Savage,
Charles Alston,
Selma Burke, Morgan and Marvin Smith, all these artists, and then she took them with them. Charles Alston, who was a co-director with her at her art school. Then he became the director of murals at Harlem Hospital. He brought a young Jacob Lawrence with him to work on the murals, and these things went on and on. So teaching the youth to appreciate it, and also again, like this is a way that they can learn. And Jacob Lawrence also, as well as Bearden, was very important in creating works about our history to teach us. So it's very important.
Yeah, and I'll just take up where Tammi left off, is that, you know, Bearden is an artist that we're able to take parts of his life and parts of his interests and experiences and put them into a curriculum. And so this is the way you start to sneak it into schools, because we deal with a lot of public schools that don't have art programs anymore. So we created this curriculum for classroom teachers to teach a variety of subjects through his work and his life, not just his images, but also his activism. You know, he was involved in some of these early organizations in Harlem, the Studio Museum of Harlem. And so, you know, Sin-K Gallery was something that he started. But, you know, I don't want to talk so much about Bearden, but I do mean that the women, I mean, Nanette Bearden started the foundation, and this was her charge, her idea about education, and to continue and to perpetuate this for young people. But it is a way that you can put the tools into the classroom teachers' hands, so that when they're teaching history, students can choose to do an art project, right, as a way of doing this. And then, you know, also how artists struggle throughout their lives to create things that would not be propaganda, but be art that would move people and change people. And that is, and those are real technical questions that they would struggle with. You know, what is it that we're doing? What is it we can do as artists? on the way to our own expression that says something to the larger social issue. And that's a struggle that artists struggle with today. But two artists I'd like to also just, pull up their names is, artists like Faith Ringel and Betty Saar, because they're both artists. And when I think about PEACES, I love, that PEACES is this collective. But Betty Saar and Faith Ringel were artists who used, fabric, fiber, quilting, and these are thought of as traditional women's work and crafts, right? But they brought them into the fine art realm, and they were respected for that. And so that is, just a continuum. Now you have artists who are mixing medias and they're using all kinds of things. But Betty Saar and Faith Ringel are still alive to this day. And so if you want to look up their names and look up and support their work, they're there for that. And the other thing I can say about education is about exhibitions, right? Like, we had a recent exhibition at the Brooklyn Museum, and it was about women, Black women, and radical expression. It was called We Wanted a Revolution. And it covers like 1965 to 85. And I believe it was 2017 at the Brooklyn Museum. And so look that up, because that, and what they did was they created all kinds of curriculum for kids. And so the museums are educational institutions and they need to do that work. And so exhibitions are opportunities for that.
With education is like a little bit smaller. You two have done so much work. I just have arrived. I was like, I don't have anything better than what I'm hearing. I think my experience with education in this country, because I came to this country in 2012. So my experience in the country is really an immigrant and a person who has been choosing for the last 9 years to live here, and this is now my home. But I witnessed, like, in universities that education can come to you based on who is offering and how they're offering and under what kind of pedagogy, curriculum, and truly a curated space you are getting that. And as a student in this country, as a teacher, I have witnessed how much the design around us is white and old. So it is just like so wonderful to find yourself in these places. And if you have an energy and patience that I have to like see what else you can do in the institution. So when I'm in these like spaces, as I said, like I very much get surprised how women find it impossible to challenge the system. And I remember myself then again from like 10 years ago that, okay, I didn't have the right language or tools to say and acknowledge power dynamics, racism, sexism, homophobia that exists in these schools. And now these kids need my allyship. These students that are younger than me need my allyship. So how in the core of my collaboration with them as a teacher, as a director, as a guest artist, as a person who still is holding power in the space as a leadership, but is trying to be more like fair, just, inclusive. Like, it's a lot of work. And I think what I'm trying to say is that in our experience together as a student in a school, and then with me, we learn and we grow. And part of those growth is like, because of the art. Like we have a play at the table and we have to tell this story, and this story is not designed for the members around the table like most of the time, right? You have rooms with people like us and like diverse and from different backgrounds, and we need to tell a story that Shakespeare wrote. So you have to keep like giving yourself and your body and your personality shapes. And if you're young, sometimes it's painful. And if you're in hands of not the right person, then it hurts. So I think like I witnessed in high school a little bit in New York and Brooklyn that women like with hijab, women with like families that are more like traditional that this country or the modern pop culture of this country, they need spaces that are different than the spaces that exist to be an actor all of a sudden or to be a storyteller. We have to think about like how structure can change in order for a person to be able to be brave, to be able to discover themselves. And it's harder for, as we know, our privilege is harder for women who like, women of color with like religion backgrounds that are different. Mm-hmm. So like, how I do this work is with different ways. Like sometimes it's just me being a guest artist in a university. Sometimes it's me like advocating in like city where I can for spaces that are more designed for people who are different. And by different, I say not white, mm-hmm. you know, like girls who need to be able to start doing acting, they can't somewhere like I studied in Yale School of Drama, just jump. Like you're not allowed to touch each other. Like you're not like that comfortable all of a sudden to jump and show very vulnerable places. That's nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. We have to create space mm-hmm. for that person to be able to exist and grow. And so I think that's where activism and artists come so close that I can't divide it anymore. Yes, like my relationship to young youth and educational is all of those.
And sometimes it's just about having a voice and being at the table. You know, when these decisions are being made, when these grants yes. are being given out, yes. when jobs are being, you know, won. You know, if there's not enough, it's about representation sometimes, you know, and yeah, we don't always, sometimes we're relied on to make certain decisions, assumptions about decisions. But, you know, the more numbers there are, the more diversity there is, the more opportunities we can make for younger people. I mean, I know that I'm asked to be on a lot of committees and you know, mentor young artists. And that's in part just because I've been here for a long time and I know I can sort of say where to point them. I don't always know, but, you know, I can give them connections that would give them a little edge, right, to get in there. But, you know, it's really important. And now in this sort of Black Lives Matter moment is what I like to call it, you know, finally, some people are being called upon to be at the table. You know, it's done kind of in a, you know, making it just, you know, they're just doing their due diligence. But at the same time, hey, you just hold that door open, just hold it open a little longer, crack it open, and then I'm going to sit my big ass on their table, you know?
Yeah.
Excuse my language. Sorry. This is an adult program, right?
One of the things that I'm hearing, not to sum up, but I am hearing this very vocal from the three of you, this idea that taking art away from youth takes their voice away. Mm-hmm, 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 mm-hmm. The practice in artistic realms, in theater, in art, in painting, in photography, in all of these big ways, people, if they're coming from a different religious background, if they're coming from a different gender background, racial background, if whatever it is that they are experiencing, if they do not have an artistic outlet, it is harder for them to find, and Shadi, you're talking about stories, it's harder for them to tell their story. Is that something that you would agree with or that you feel confident in agreeing with? Is that something you're saying?
Yeah, I agree that. I'm sorry, go ahead, Tammi.
No, go ahead, Shadi.
I think it's one of the tools, and it's one of the very powerful tools that taking away just I don't know where is else there. Like if you like look at a kid's life or a young person with all of these social medias and all of the speed of things that there's so much content out there, and it's out there very fast. And I think it's very hard for a younger person to figure out everything with the complexity that we're living in. So art allowing a person at the age of like 16 to all of a sudden play a role of Hamlet in a small, tiny thing in like school, what happens is that you have to stretch your experience to understand the role and play it. And in that, something magical happens. And I think that happened to any artist. It happened to me. I once played a role and was like, oh my God, I cannot not do this for the rest of my life. So it changed everything. And I became like an artist, a storyteller. But I think students need that more and more, because it's a place to make mistakes, play a role, figure out what's happening, who are you, what do you want. It's practicing being brave and jumping.
But at the same time, I just want to say, you know, one of the reasons I feel like that it's necessary to cultivate the minds of the young is because, and Deidra could attest to that as well as Shadi, as an artist, you're not supported. You need it. You need that. So I know we're saying, oh, we got to do this and that for the children, but you're doing it for the children because you need it. You need to cultivate that person, because you, as much as you work, and like Shadi said, it's hard. You, as an artist and as a woman of color, you are on your own. You literally have hardly any support. You hardly have support. So you're going to get, you know, all that growth and learning, but you also need to cultivate your audience, as well as give them some magic, give them something to aspire to, but you need that back.
Yeah, that I agree with that. Thank you, Tammi. But also about the preservation of these stories and the preservation of these people's lives. Okay, so, you know, when I go looking, you know, in the surveys of art, and I don't see myself in there, you know, I'm going to go to the library, I'm going to look, I'm going to try to find, and there has to be some people at the table saying, no, this needs to be preserved too. No, we need this in the archive, you know. And I think about especially the Schomburg, you know, because that's an organization dear to my heart, because you have artists in there who are living and working, who have given their papers, right? These are not the Romare Beardens, Jacob Lawrence, you know, Elizabeth Catlett. They're not the artists you've heard about. But you can go to the Schomburg and learn about their lives and their work. Their work is important too. Right? And so somebody has to say, well, no, we need to collect this. We need to preserve this, because we can't teach everything in the schools. Jacob Lawrence, he did all of that research for that, you know, pivotal series, the migration series, at the library, 135th Street. And it, you know, and he was able to find what he needed, and he was nurtured by these stories, you know, like the women's stories and biographies about artists. They teach kids more than just about being artists. They teach them about life and bravery and what they can stand up for and how they can lead their lives. I mean, that's almost as important as actually seeing the artwork.
I mean, if we look at birth of something like theater, and I talk for theater because that's my like field, it was a way of practicing democracy. Of course, their democracy didn't include women at that time, but Greeks, like, you know, 2,500 years ago, they made stories and played it out loud to show and introduce for the first time ideas like justice or revenge. And so like it was a very political act. Everyone would gather and watch a story together, and like that will be a way of thinking about new ideas of civilization. So sometimes, like, because no matter what, I'm not American, so my experience of art is different from this country. But what I am always criticizing about art in this country, especially theater, again, because should talk just about that in my head, because I don't have enough information about the rest of it, but capitalism is not separated from like these arts. And unfortunately, like something like theater is very much challenged and struggling because there's no budget, there's no fund, there is not a way of supporting artists the way that is just like necessary, because art is necessary. Like art is not just like a day in the classroom that no one knew what to do. We need artists to keep us like alive with a tempo of society, because the media lies and historians are like most of the time not on your side. So I think it's so necessary. And again, when I said there's so many jobs we have as artists, another job for me is to be the politician, unfortunately, to be like, where is the money? America is not like a poor country. Give money to artists. I should not have insurance because a director at a young age doesn't have any union or any like support from the country. So like I think it's very important when we talk about like art to like acknowledge and keep acknowledging artists are very much underpaid. They are most of the time overqualified for their roles. Being a woman, add to that. But like now the movement of the society and young artists of color is like, hey, you all, we have everything we need. Let's grab each other. Allyship, networking, collaboration. These are my ideas of moving forward. Like I'm a big fan of Adrienne Mary Brown, and I'm sure everyone knows it, but the idea of transformative justice and the idea of us holding each other and using each other's powers, being it whatever, we have to change some of these fundamental problematic situations, because I care about next generation and I see something great coming out of it.
Yes.
I share, like I do that in my own practice. I have like collectives that I'm making that I really don't make any money out of it, unfortunately, and it's hard to keep them alive. But somehow I think like community has to be there for each other, and people who I understand the struggle can support each other and be each other's ally in a way that makes life easier, and not just on that, but the art possible. Like I see how I don't see my sisters, I don't see my people in the industry, and that's not accidental, we know at this point. But like what are the things we can do about it are limited to who we are and how much we want to do. At the same time, I want to acknowledge it is not our job to fix it. Like I don't say that because most of the time as a woman of color, the fixing is on me. But I'm not saying anyone should do that, but I'm saying until there's pleasure in this movement, like we can do it and we must do it. And there's always someone to hold your hand. My hand have been held for many allies, and I will say I am one. I try always to be one because I get empowered by it.
Yeah, look at the PEACES Collective. That's why we're here.
Yes.
This is what they're working together and creating something that helps to support a larger community that is, extraordinary in these times. We know what to do. We just get in there and we do it.
I'm wondering if there is a piece personally from each of you, a piece of art or from any realm, dance, theater, music, acrylic, poetry, from any realm that you have seen or experienced that has moved you to act, that has moved you to do something. And what was it? Sharing what it was and what you acted upon.
So much.
That's a heavy question.
Yeah,
Think
it
about
is.
that.
It is. It is.
About it, one of the reasons I ask is we have so many people in the chat, right, who are really hanging on the words of Shadi, Deidra, and Tammi. They are really loving what all the artists that you are bringing up, and are taking those artists, taking notes and making sure to go and find them. And in this idea, Deidra, that you said, we know what to do, right? We know what to do. We know where to find these people. But I'm sure people want to know, like, when I see something, what do I do? When I see something that moves me, what do I do? How do I take that feeling? How do I move forward?
With art, that's a Go ahead, Deidra.
Well, yeah, I'm on it's on the tip of my tongue. Yes. Okay. Well, I'm gonna think about. I'm gonna talk a little bit about sort of this idea that we touched on earlier, about work that is sort of pre-literate artwork, and how important that was to me, because I do have an interest. I am American in every sense of the way. And so I really have to push myself to learn about other cultures, right? And so I feel like when I, first saw some of the works from Goya, who's a Spanish artist, the intensity and the pain that you see, and he's painting about war. And also, a lot of, my art history background was what taught me, many Christian themes. And I hate to say it, I wasn't reading the Bible, like I was looking at the pictures and learning the stories in art history, just the basic general art history that was teaching me these stories. But I do think, issues of war, when you can see, when I think about some of the photographs that were taken during the civil rights, and you think about civil rights movements, and you think about how those pictures move the crowd, right? Like moved white people, moved everyone, because once they saw the visual manifestation of treatment that Blacks were getting, they were no longer able to deny it. Right? And it was so powerful. And many of those pictures were cinematic. They were taken by professional professional photographers, and photojournalists, but also artistic, photographers. And they were done in a way to make you feel and in your face. And it changed the minds. Because you have the one thing where people can say that they believe in something, but it isn't until they see it in a way that they hadn't seen it before that their hearts change. And so that kind of powerful photography, that kind of art that has no words, you don't need any words to go along with it. The visual, and I also we'll talk about live art. Because I talked about that earlier, about how important theater was to me. Okay, and this is kind of corny, and this is not about activism, but the first time I saw Phantom of the Opera, I was blown away visually, and just the way that they made the water in the boat, I was like, okay, I want to be a stage artist, right? It was just like stagecraft, because it made me feel like I was there and I was in it, and and it's from an artistic sensibility, but and it didn't make me go out and do any activism, but it made me feel and it made me think. And so it's been the way that I've learned about other cultures. It's been the way that I've learned about other types of art. So those are all the things that I kind of take from art, from my education and from just my ability to observe.
Yeah.
Yes, and I want Shadi and Tammi just definitely to chime in on this one, because I am not necessarily talking about activism, right? I am talking about being moved in general. And Deidra,
Right.
just hearing you talk about being moved, that's really what art is about. That's why we are here, because if you can feel moved, then then the next step, right, is how do I find more of that within us? The viewer wants to find more of that, and the more of that you find, then you start to get to these pictures that incite activism, that incite care, that incite going over to other countries and taking care of people, all of these things. So I'm wondering, yes, if you were moved to be in as an activist, yes, but I'm also looking for those stories of I was moved. It brought me to tears. It made me feel something, joy, sadness.
Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
I could, right. I could say that for me, even though I was a lit major undergrad, what brought me to the Schomburg Center was poet Quincy Troop, who was my professor and told me to go uptown that I could find what I need there. And being just blown away when I walked into the Schomburg Center, uh, it was like a total validation of my existence, that that there was a building that held all this information pertaining to my history, that it was important for the stories that I was brought up here, and knowing that you could see yourself reflected in that institution. And in fact, with the Harlem Renaissance and Elaine Locke, who was a philosopher, and I think he was the first Rhodes Scholar in the early. He might have. I don't think he was the first PhD from Harvard, but he was definitely the first scholar. But he said to artists, look to Africa, not to Europe, to create art. He wanted artists to erase the propaganda um, and the derogatory images of Black people. So I'll just say Augusta Savage. It was revolutionary when she sculpted a bust of her nephew. The piece is called Gamin, Gamin. That's like a street urchin. But for her to use Black physiognomy and to celebrate it, this is before Black is beautiful. This is my nephew, and he's beautiful. That was revolutionary. Aaron Douglas with his murals that we have at the Schomburg Center, that it's called Aspects of Negro Life. So the first one is in Africa. The second one, I think it's called From Slavery Through Reconstruction. Then I can't even remember the second one, but it's a history of Black people in these four murals. So you're going and you're like, oh, you know, just to see yourself reflected in a positive way is a job, is reversing all the negative psychology, all the negative imagery, even right now, that exists to oppress and not allow you to grow, not make you feel good about yourself. Or that's how artists is revolutionary. Making art is revolutionary as far as I'm concerned. Oh yeah, that's Augusta Savage's piece Gammon. She won in 1929 a Guggenheim Fellowship as well as a Rosenwald Fellowship, and that's called Gammon.
Mm-hmm.
So that started her on her way to teaching. So she's always been about the kids. Matter of fact, one of her most famous quotes is, if I don't, my monument is not any artwork that I created, but that I instilled something in a child that he may be creative and create something. That's my monument. Yeah.
Yeah, oh my God, I can't agree with you, Tammy, more. Like I think the absence of our aesthetic is just like really one of the things that bothers me so much. Like we talk about classical texts and somehow Rumi, Hafez, or Shahnameh, like Indian literature that is fascinating, like Chinese literature and myths that are beautiful. Like none of them takes, not in the world, I'm talking about America, none of them like is in our books. Like something else considers being like classic. And I think like aesthetic and sharing aesthetics and understanding that we do have our aesthetics, and our aesthetics are as beautiful and as complete as any other aesthetic in the world. I think it's by itself a really great work to do. I'm gonna have an outdoor performance festival in summer in Brooklyn. Everyone is invited. It's free. It's going to be in Prospect Park, and it's like with a lot of collaboration with many different like institutions and collectives. But my goal is to have 100% of artists that I'm hiring immigrants. And when I talk about this, like with like people involved in the commission, they're like asking, what is my political message? And I find it very problematic when it comes from a white person asking me that question. I'm like, it is political enough that this is the standard. Like everyone is like people of color and immigrants in this show. And it's about celebration, and the whole festival is for celebration, joy, curated dance party. Like, why do I need to keep bringing my traumas and oppression in order to exist as an artist? Or like the place that I get hired is about those. Like, we passed that. We had the same 2020, all of us. Like, that was enough. Like, any one of us should be able to share their own aesthetics, whatever they are, how big they are. And there's not a label for us to, like, there's no need a label for something like this. I keep saying it's not an immigrant festival. It is a festival with non-American aesthetics. And we're going to gather and like just celebrate together. But that idea being at radical or need excuses, it's just like, funny.
Yeah, it's radical because they see that you're using your mind and that they're not at the center.
Yes, and it's radical because you're showing joy in a way in which they don't know how to express joy.
Exactly. Joy and celebration is part of our being, and like it's even too late to say that.
And this is why they're so involved with culture, with Black culture too. You know, it's like they see this joy and this freedom in it that they want for themselves, right? And it's hard for them to express it, and to just enjoy and to see people joyfully, dancing and able to connect with their body and their mind and the, viewers and everything. That it's just, it's a complicated thing, but it's really not that deep. It's a complex thing, but it's really not that uncommon and that deep. Just let it go. Just be in the moment and, accept that it is what it is and that you don't always know about it. You don't always have to know about it. If it changes something in you, it's political. If it makes change in your body and you're expressing, you're finding something, it's a political act. Believe me.
Yes, absolutely.
Keeping on this track, this very easy question I have for you. Why is it important that female artists are a part of any conversation? You're talking political, we're talking all of it. Why is it important that female artists are a part of any conversation?
Because we're goddesses.
Because because we're smarter. We're smarter, and and we I think, and you know, maybe I'll get in trouble for saying this, but we tend to be socialized differently, to think of others, to be inclusive, and you know, to be a little bit more in touch with community and with taking care of and for others. And so we're not, and I'm not saying that we're not in the boardroom and we're not like, we can't be, you know, hard ass and we can't, you know, get the stuff done. But it's gonna feel differently. Whatever it is, it's gonna feel differently. It's going to be more inclusive. You know, I think that that's the hope. Now, you know, I'm not saying that that's been every experience. Sometimes you will get some women who are, you know, quite damaged and, you know, creating enough havoc. But like I said, it's not about having one woman at the table. It's about having several. It's not about having one Black person in the room. It's about having a diversity of voices, because we do things differently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We think differently. We've had to have different concerns.
And while we're
As
speaking,
Shadi and Tammi, as both of you start to even to answer this question, I'm even going to narrow it just a little. So I had asked, why is it important that female artists are part of any conversation? I'm now asking, why is it important that female artists of color are a part of any conversation?
because if we don't, if female artists, if we don't say it, we're out of it. We're out of it.
We got more
And I
style.
also want to say that while Deirdre and Shadi and even me, we're talking very positively, um, our what we're talking is very aspirational and not a lot of ways and not factual. So I'm just, and what I'm saying is that while we're being very supportive, uh, women artists are so low on a totem pole, so they're not acknowledged. Everything is a fight. Everything is hard. Just in terms of books, it wasn't until what is this, 2021, 15 years ago, that the first book on African American women artists, like an encyclopedia, was written. That's in 2005. So, like Shadi, she's working, Deidra's working, everybody's working hard. They're out there. Black women artists, women of color artists, they're out there, but it's a fight every day. So that's what I'm saying. Like, we're speaking very aspirational, we're speaking of the future. We're living it, we're doing it, but it's a dog fight for Black women artists. It's beautiful, like Deirdre, it sounds good, but I'm talking, it's a dog fight. It's
Tammi,
terrible.
What is the answer? Tell us a little bit about from where you are to where Deidra is. There's a middle. You're saying Deidra is talking, Shandi, we're all talking about this future that you're talking about. We're all talking about a future where we're at the table. And right now we're not there yet, is what I'm hearing from you. What is the bridge?
Well, I could say one thing. It's not all like it's just against women or against Black people, but America as a whole, we're a young country, and we don't appreciate art. We don't appreciate art. And other cultures, like say in France, and I'm not saying they're not racist or whatever, but they hold their artists in high esteem. They support their artists. I think even Germany with the pandemic and other European countries, they were artists got like a stimulus. There's nothing like that here.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it's because we're capitalists. So just I don't know. I think it is maybe because we're capitalists too, but even Black male artists, the best Black artists, whoever it is making 10 cents to what a white artist, maybe not even on that level, makes. But so what I'm saying is this, because we're young in the country, and I don't think Americans as a whole have a love for artists or a respect for artists like other cultures do. There's nobody. There's not going to be a protest because Augusta Savage's gammon didn't go on auction for $1 million. There's nobody who's going to, you know what I'm saying? Not that, so like, there's nobody who's going to protest Bearden's, I don't know, what's his highest worth that went in auction? Say if it's 650,000.
Maybe a little bit more. Yeah.
Okay. Nobody's going to protest that. There's no, I'm just saying that we don't have it. So that's part of the problem. But everything, just like with white men make 100% of a dollar. Then after that, I think it's then it could be Asians. I'm not sure, but I know that white women say they may make 80 cents on a dollar. Then Black men make 78 cents of a dollar. Black women make 63 cents of a dollar.
Yeah.
That's just,
yeah.
and, you know.
And capitalism is one very, very big reason that we suffer as artists. You know, when you look at socialist countries, well, you know what? We had our experiment with the WPA, you know, where, you know, during the Depression, when they needed to put people to work, artists were used, they were employed, they were paid to make public works. And the works that came out of those projects, those programs, was enormous. And it really supported artists. And then that window closed, you know. But also, I think, you know, because traditionally the arts, and let's be clear here, it was an elitist kind, and it's still very elitist. It was enjoyed and it was performed by the rich. For the rich. And so we still have that baggage to deal with, that, you know, that this is something that people can enjoy in their leisure, right? And so in order to have leisure, you have to have money. You have to have the kind of job that allows you to have leisure, right? And so because we're, you know, sort of, we are locked into that, as when you think about donors and patrons, I mean, that's a whole nother panel, is like the support of the arts and how it cripples artists in many ways. Again, that's a whole nother panel, but yes, we cannot get away from that idea of the elitism. It's got to be the last area that is being desegregated, right, in America, the last area.
Yeah, I agree with everything Diedra and Tammi are saying. Like, it's the same thing. And if I want to answer your question about where is the between, I think that's where I say we have somehow like figured out new words and language in order to define our surrounding ourselves and design our surrounding and ourselves. And I think like my suggestion, my offering is collaboration and allyship and networking and community buildings are very practical works that we can do in order to still do the work and make the gaps smaller. And at the same time, that doesn't mean that we don't acknowledge that, as I said, I most of the time am token. Most of the time I am underpaid. Most of the time I am overqualified for the job. So these problems, part of it can be fixed by me as a woman of color in this country. And part of it, I don't want to do that. It's not like the pain and struggle that brings for me. It's not something I'm looking for it. And there are ways to do it. Like I always give this example to younger people. Like I'm like, you can be an ally to your like woman friend, or you can go fix the man. And you have to decide which one you want to do, how much you want to do. Don't do more than you want. Don't do that. I will never advocate for that. But somehow we live in a very different spectrum of like skills, tolerances, personalities. Like, for example, when I came to this country, all of a sudden everyone felt I understand what it means to be a woman of color. But I had experience for 23 years of my life like a white person in this culture. I was living in my own country with privileges that I had. I was thrown into this culture and said, you are a woman of color. And I was like, but like, I don't have the same experience as you have yet. And I can't even compare it. My oppression is political, and somehow the oppression of skin in this country is new to me for just 9 years. So these are all like very complicated like concepts that we're understanding. But I will say there is a way to like grow together and take care of each other. And not everyone needs to sacrifice themselves. My tolerance might be higher in fighting sexism or racism because I got here. I never expect that from my friend that has different identity politics. I know we are different in all of that. But yes, I will say to your answer, like, I think we've found some tools and some understanding that we will not go back. Therefore, there's some work that can be done if anyone wants to.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Friends, Deidra, Tammi, Shandi,
Shannon,
you did it. Shannon, we did it. I love it.
I just want to say thank you to Shadi and to Tammi. I mean, I'm feeling just honored to be in their company and to be having this conversation. I don't know why we're not meeting every Sunday and just getting it down into it. I love it.
And Shadi,
and all of the comments
to support your festival and your theatrical productions. I'm so
Thank
glad
you
that
so much.
Just let me know.
I will leave some information in the chat. Roots Festival, the festival that I'm co-founder and co-curator, we have for March and April every weekend celebrating Iranian women artists. And there are filmmakers, visual artists, musicians, actors. We have so many work to offer and to announce, like, you know, these big, amazing artists exist. Let's build community, let's work, and let's listen to each other.
Yes. There's so many things to support friends and family. We are going to go back to the fairgrounds. We're going to go back to the tables. You're going to be able to have a little bit of communion with each other, communion with the artists and curators that we've had on the panel. If you come back Wednesday, April 21st, then you will be at another one of these wonderful workshops, a new education for a new community, preparing the next generation. So please return. Please come back and see us. This, oh my goodness, PEACES Collective is doing wonderful things. So we are going to go back so that Shadi, Deidra, and Tammi have a time to speak to you, all of you who are in the chat. Thank you to Ikrama Muhammad for putting this together. Thank you to Karen Freeman for putting this together. We really, really appreciate it. For those of you in the chat, thank you so much for joining us. Come back next time on the 21st of April. We'll see you then. Until then, peace. PEACES Collective. We'll see you back on the floor.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.